Alright, welcome back. We're almost done. Hang in there. In this video, we will start programming the dots here that will be generated inside the maze, and Pac-Man will eat them. So I'm going to program this little dot, and I'm going to already start a script with when flag clicked. Now, we are going to generate the dots inside the maze in the same fashion that we did for the power pills. So the dot itself will be hidden, and it will traverse the maze, and it will generate a bunch of clones. So here's how I'm going to do it. I am going to set the sprite's coordinate to the following coordinates. So make sure you have the same numbers as I do. -208 and -146. So -208 and -146 is this point in the maze, right over here in the bottom left part of the maze. Now, this sprite itself will be hidden, but it will jump 16 points to the right repeatedly until it finishes this row. So here's how I'm going to implement that. I'm going to say repeat, and I'm going to repeat 25, so 25 repetitions. And inside, I'm going to change x by 16. So change x by 16. So the dot here will do something like this. It will traverse the row of the maze very, very quickly. Now, as well as changing the sprite's coordinate, I'm going to make the sprite leave a clone at that point. So I'm going to go to control and I'm going to create clone of myself at that point. So notice what happens if I hit the flag now. Notice that the sprite leaves clones wherever it goes. Now, we'd like this to happen not just for a single row, but for the entire maze. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to wrap this whole repeat block in another repeat block. And I'm going to do repeat 19. And in between these repeat 25s inside, I'm going to change the y coordinate of the sprite by 16 pixels. So I'm also going to change y by 16. So this will fill up a row with clones, and then the original sprite will change the y coordinate by 16 pixels. Now at first, I also need to set x to the left-hand side of the maze. So set x to -208. So notice what happens if I hit the flag, so the dot is somewhere on the maze, and if I just click this detached script. So it sets x to -208, which is on the left side of the maze, and over 25 repetitions it will fill up a row, and then it will change its y coordinate. So the dot should move up a row. See? So the original sprite is this one at the very edge of the maze. And if I click it again, it will move back to the left-hand side and will fill another row with dots, and then it will change its y coordinate. And another row, and another row, and so on and so forth. So we would like to repeat this 19 times because the maze has 19 rows. Now, to keep track of the number of dots here on the stage, I will create a simple variable. So I'm going to make a variable for all sprites. I'm going to name this dots. So at the beginning, when the flag is clicked, this dots number will be 0. And right before I create a clone of myself, I will change dots by 1. So this is great. However, notice that not all the dots should be where they are. Obviously, dots should only be in the available spaces in the maze. So we need to filter those out. We need to make clones delete themselves if they are in an invalid position. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to control and I'm going to create a script starting with when I start as a clone. And I'm going to add some conditions. And if either one of those conditions is met, then the clone should disappear. For example, if and I'm going to go to sensing and I'm going to say touching color. So the most obvious one is the touching the inner part of the maze. So if it's touching the inner wall of the maze, this color, then it should not be here. So I'm going to decrease the number of dots So change dots by -1 and then delete this clone. So I'm going to delete this clone. Now I'm going to hide the original sprite and I'm going to show the clones. So I'm going to hide here when the flag is clicked, so that's for the original sprite, but when I start as a clone, I'm going to show myself. So the clones are visible. Alright, so let's hit the flag now and let's see what's happening. So notice that the clones are now being generated in the available spaces on the maze. This is amazing. So notice how all these clones are being generated. This is awesome. Notice that they are still being generated in some unavailable places, but we'll fix those in a second. Now the maze is full. Now let's add some more conditions similar to this touching inner part of the wall thing. So for example, I'm going to duplicate it and I'm simply going to say if it's touching the orange color of the little door here, this orange color. So notice that this dot should not be here. All right, so if it's touching this orange color, then also change dots by -1 and delete this clone. And because we're duplicating lots of code, like change dots by -1 and delete this code, I'm simply going to create a simple block like dot should not be here and reuse this one. So if we define dot should not be here as change dots by -1 and delete this clone, then we can simply reuse this red custom block here and here as well. We should also not generate dots in the cage for the ghosts. So I'm going to add another if check. And here I'm going to bring in very many and operators. So I'm going to bring actually 4. So something like that with 4 diamond spaces. And we're going to do these checks based on the coordinate of the dot. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say if the x coordinate of the dot is bigger than a certain amount, and I'm going to say -40, and the x coordinate of the dot is less than the far right side of the cage, which is +40, so I'm going to bring in the less than operator. And in between them, I'm going to put in x position here. So if the x position of the dot is bigger than -40, which is the left side of the cage, and the x position is less than 40, which is the right side of the cage, then it's very likely that the dot is in the cage. Now I'm going to add a similar check for the y coordinate as well. So I'm going to bring in a less than operator and a greater than operator. And the y position should be bigger than -20 and less than +20. So in between these coordinates. So I'm going to put in y position in these spaces. So let me explain. What does this operator want to do? Now imagine all the coordinates with the x coordinate equals -40. So they are all the points on this imaginary vertical line. X position greater than -40 means being to the right of this vertical line. The same with x position equals 40. X position equals 40 means this imaginary vertical line right over here to the right side of the cage. So this constraint, x position bigger than -40 and x position less than 40, means all the points in this area over here. Now we can add a similar constraint on the other dimension as well. All the points with y position -20 are on the downside of the cage, so y position bigger than -20 means upwards of that. And similar for y position less than -20. So this imaginary horizontal line. So the only space that fills all these constraints is the space in the cage, which is why this huge operator over here denotes all the dots inside the cage for the ghosts. So, hoping that makes sense, if a clone satisfies these constraints, the dot should not be here. The dot should also not be in the original position of Pac-Man, which is 0 and -80. So I'm going to bring in an if block. So if, and I'm going to bring in an AND operator. So if the X position is 0 and Y position is negative 80. So bring in two equals blocks. So if the X position is 0 and Y position is negative 80, I've actually typed in Y, but I need the Y position of the sprite, then the dot should not be here. There's also an illegal dot here where the fruits are, and there are some illegal dots in the position of power pills. So we'll fix those in a second. I'm gonna say if touching fruits, then I'm going to delete this clone as well. So if touching the fruits, then again the dot should not be here. Now for power pills, this is going to be a little bit trickier because the power pills flash. So I'm not going to be able to check if touching power pill, because if the power pill happens to be hidden, then the if check will fail. So the dot will be still displayed. But I can add another script. So I can add another script starting with when I start as a clone, and I'm going to wait until the power pill comes back up. So wait until touching power pill. So wait until touching power pill, and then the dot should not be here. The legal dots have nowhere to go, and the illegal dots will be touched by power pill when it comes back up. Now at this point, we're ready to kick off the flag now and see our dots checks. So see that dots are not being generated inside the ghost cage in the place of power pills, touching the fruits, touching Pac-Man. So if I, whoops, I have a dot in the place of Pac-Man. So I have miscalculated something. So the rows, the generation of dots starts at the Y coordinate negative 146. Then the next row is at negative 130. Then the next row is at negative 114. Then the next row is at negative 98, and minus 16, that's at negative 82. So not negative 80 as I checked here. So it's negative 82. Let me hit the flag now and let me test that. So notice that there is now a space in the place where Pac-Man should be. Good. Now, the final thing that I'm going to do before I wrap up this video is to generate the dots not when the flag is clicked, but at the reception of a message, because we're going to have multiple levels in the game. And whenever we switch to the next level, the level needs to be prepared. So I'm going to go to the backdrop out of all places, and I'm going to add a small script. So when I start the game, so when the flag is clicked, I'm going to switch the backdrop to level 1, and I'm going to broadcast a new message. And I'm going to broadcast a new message called prepare level. And whenever we switch to a new level, I'm going to broadcast this message as well. And the dot sprite will receive that, and it will start generating the dots. So I'm going to remove that starter when flag clicked, and I'm going to replace it with when I receive prepare level, so that when I click the flag now, the dots are being prepared. Alright, we're now ready to finish up this game. So join me in the next video where we implement scoring and next levels.